Our working day, and we're going to talk about the process of lustration and who blocks this process. I invite here a member of the working group that reviews the lustration law, Karl Woloch, Secretary of the Civil Lustration Council within the Ministry of Justice, Maxim Mankovsky, and Alexandra Drik, who is the member of the Civic Lustration Committee. Good morning. We all were the witnesses of a scandal around the coming to Ukraine of the head of the Venetian Commission, Mr. Bukiki, and some of his expressions related to the work of the law on lustration. We'd like to give some explanation on this score, because from our point of view the events were covered in a not quite objective way. We'll also talk about the topic that we touched upon, and if there's an interest about the principled amendments to the lustration law, we'll talk about this. Besides, we have some charges against some dissatisfaction with some bodies about how they conduct lustration within themselves. Bukiki was here for one day. He met the President, the Prime Minister, and the Minister of Justice. I and Maxim were at the third meeting, and because the issues were discussed repeatedly, we are in the know about everything. Also about the headline on the president's site that Bukiki said that the law is bad and it has to be stopped. I wasn't at that meeting, and I can't tell you whether he said this word for word. If he did, then he went beyond the borders of his authority, because in the preliminary conclusions of the Venetian Commission, there are no such words. On the contrary, they say that the work of the group of experts continues, but these words were in the previous conclusion that was cancelled, and they were connected to the fact that the Ukrainian authors of the law were not heeded, and that's why they said that their conclusions are one-sided, and they recognized this. Then when the Ukrainian delegation went to Venice and met the Commission, I know that the attitude changed, so I don't know whether Bukiki said that the law is bad, but he did raise the question, including addressed to us, whether we don't think that the action of the law should be suspended. And he explained his words. If you are going to introduce amendments into the law, then isn't it going to happen the way that some people will be dismissed who, on the basis of the amended law, could stay? The Minister of Justice, Petrenko, who is the most competent official and who is responsible for the action of this law, and he is the most competent among the officials where the implementation of the law is concerned, gave an exhaustive answer to the question why there is no such danger. And here I quote Bukiki, who said that he is fully satisfied with the answer that he got. Why it happened so that at the meeting at the administration of the president there was not a single person who could explain the situation to Mr. Bukiki, we can only regret this fact. Maybe they were not invited there, but this is what happened. In fact, we know everything that happens there. We have talked to the experts who came with Bukiki, and at least the experts do understand quite well the specifics of Ukraine's current situation, and a group of experts is coming to Kyiv next week. There they will work out a joint position according to the law and related to the law. They will listen to our point of view. Why we don't think that we should change some things that they say should be changed, because this just will break the law and make its efficiency null and void, not just because someone has not thought of the grandiose things that they point out. I think that so far it looks like the work will be fruitful, and all the misunderstandings that are here at the moment will be rectified, and joint approaches will be found, common approaches. At any rate, I would like to emphasize that it is not the Venetian Commission who will adopt the changes, but the Ukrainian Parliament, who better than Venetian Commission know the needs of the country in this respect. How can we explain this? Why this appeared on the president's site? Why the press service has publicized it like this? I'm sure that the president was asking other questions and raising other issues. For instance, don't they think it necessary to write in the constitution a separate status of the Donbass like it is done in Moldova with Transnistria? Somehow no one has headlined this issue, like Bukiki wants or considers that Donbass should have a separate status. Everybody understands why, because if this appears on the site, then the next day there will be a storming of the administration of the president. But the matter is that we have the impression that our top officials like to selectively apply the law on lustration. Where they want to do this, they do, and where some people hamper them, they dismiss them. But in other cases, they say the law is bad, it is not individualized enough, and that's why I don't fulfill it. I can tell you quite a lot of examples. And in the public council, I think it has already a joke, like they ask the administration of the president why Mr. X is not dismissed, although he should be dismissed according to the law. The administration sends this to the Ministry of Justice, and it goes to the lustration department that works with us, with whom we actually composed this letter to the administration of president. So what can they answer? Maybe because they don't want to dismiss this person. So in order to cover these shameful and absolutely unlawful cases, including the Prosecutor General's office, they criticize the law, not because there's a lot to talk about. So this is about the first issue. The issue number 2, about the amendments to the law. In principle, everybody should understand that no principled criteria of the evaluation of lustrated persons are not changed. Only a very small amount of principled things are changed that we consider have to be corrected and improved. The first change concerns judges. Personalization appears there. This is in the materials of the plenary meeting of the High Court. We agree with this, although I do emphasize that we have planned to personalize the approach to judges. It cannot be otherwise, because the Constitution of Ukraine suggests that they should be dismissed only after the study of the case in the High Council of Justice, and we based our approach on this principle. But the judges insist that this should be written in the law, and this will be done. Why we think this is just? Besides, apart from what I have already said about the demand of the Constitution, there's another thing. The law, in principle, gives all the reasons for the removal from the state power. We have two main reasons. I'm not mentioning here the affiliation with the KGB because it pertains to a very small number of people. The main things is either holding a top official position, starting from the prosecutor or deputy prosecutor of the city, so top positions in within the Yanukovych regime, or some actions during the Dignity Revolution against the protest activists, the Maidan participants. We think that because the judges, in this case, we're talking about the removal of them from the state service of judges for certain actions, not for the fact that they held the position. If we were dismissing them for holding positions, then everyone should have been dismissed. And the law does not stipulate this. We assess their actions, and because we assess actions, they should be assessed individually. So there will be a mechanism written in the law, and by the way, it already exists in the previous version of the law, about the restoration of trust in the court system. There's a temporary commission there that studies the work of judges during Maidan. So this commission makes it from this law to from that law to this law. This is principle change number one. And the second one, which is partially realized, maybe it will be broadened. There's a notion which we call a removal of bans or administrative amnesty, people who should be dismissed but who are needed for the defense of the country. Maybe this category will be broadened. There are still discussions in the working group about this, and we think that we will take into account additional points of view, including MPs. This is the thing number two, and number three, there will be an independent lustration body. We've been talking about this for long. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the dream of the independent lustration body was always there, including the time when this law was being created. But we understood that if we write into the original law this clause, then taking into account the need for the budget, for premises, and a lot of other things, then the creation of this body and its work will probably start, in the best case, half a year after the law is passed. So we based our work on the presumption that we don't need such a body. Let there be a small body that controls the work conducted by other departments and ministries. So now, when the law is already working, there's an possible opportunity to raise the level of authority and the status of this body to the level of the central body of power, whether this will be an analog to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, or I, for instance, think that more feasible is that we leave it on the level of like fiscal service, which formally is within the framework of the Ministry of Finance, but in reality is an independent body whose manager is appointed by the Cabinet of Ministers and has enough independence. These are principal changes. In fact, there will be a lot of changes. There will be some serious changes in the issue of property lustration. This is our dream. I hope that we will be able to work out some actionable mechanisms that we haven't even been dreaming about when we submitted our first option to the parliament, and there were no options that they would vote in favor of the mechanism of property lustration that we can now introduce. If this all gets through the parliament. I can't tell you all because it is too raw, but it's going to be an absolute revolution if this happens. So these are major issues, and Sasha Drik will tell you about the last issue. She will name the names that probably will sound in the parliament today, and this also pertains to the General Prosecutor's Office. But you should understand this within a context. You will only hear now what we know. This is 1/10 of what's going on in the Prosecutor's General's Office. But you will see how they apply the law at their own will. For instance, Holomsha, who has the biggest merit in for Maidan, he was dismissed very soon, but other prosecutors are not touched, and they are fulfilling the law as they want. And in order to cover themselves, they say that the law is bad, but in reality, even if the law were bad, there's no other law, and there's no other option for the Prosecutor General to perform the law as it is, and no one gave him the right to selectively apply the law.
Thank you. As you know, we are analyzing the inspections, and we're inspecting all the civil servants. We have most claims to the General Prosecutor's Office. Vitaly Yerema, the General Prosecutor, was criticizing publicly this law, but it's not clear why the General Prosecutor starts criticizing the law of the state which hires him. I have two pages of claims with specific names. First, why prosecutor of Donetsk region hasn't been dismissed. According to the law on lustration, the immunity of the tow participant is not expanded to all who are to be dismissed. He's still on his position. He had to be dismissed in October 2014. Why the prosecutor of one region is not? Why Pavlo Pagutsky is not dismissed? The military prosecutor, why Yergen Paramonov is not dismissed, who also falls under automatic lustration. What hampers to dismiss Sergei Yeldashov? We know that he falls under lustration as the result of the inspection, because he hasn't been dismissed during Euromaidan. There's a lot of information, and I am trying to say it all. Also, we are looking at the tax returns. They were published, the tax returns of civil servants were published, and we can analyze them, and there are interesting facts. Oleg Bachun has almost 6 million of gifts, and how has he got 15 hectares of land, 2 apartments, a house, 30-meter garage, if from 1990 he's been working as a judge, and 2 years he was working as an assistant to the MP? How Anatoly Danilenko has 2 land plots of 2 hectares and 14 hectares, some houses and 3 apartments? How does it come that the wife of the General Prosecutor has a land plot of 7 hectares, a house, garage, and 3 cars? How does it come that the senior prosecutor, Tatiana Boyko, has more than 3 million of income, plus 1,200 square meters of land, and an apartment which she bought for 500 million hryvnias? How the senior deputy of General of the prosecutor Stapichuk declared more than 2 million hryvnias, and he could not explain most of that income. He could not explain where he got this money. The chief accountant, Yerhova, has almost 2 million hryvnias of income. In which combat did she participate in October when she attended some seminar in Kramatorsk? Kirill Volkov has an income of 1.6 million hryvnias. Why do we still have the prosecutors operating who are hiding their revenues? Like, for example, Sergei Dvorak, he has hidden a car for 1 million hryvnias and elite real estate. Our journalists made investigation and they show everything. And this person didn't provide any comments. Why the prosecutors who were executing the orders of Yanukovych, they were not dismissed? They are on their positions and they were promoted in the career. For example, Roman Voloshin in December 2013 was accusing the participants of Euromaidan, and he's now promoted in career. Or Konstantin Didenko, who was also working on the case against Avtomaidan, and he's the first deputy prosecutor of the city of Kiev. Why out of 156 lustrated prosecutors, 120 are appealing the dismissal in the courts? This Friday we had a big victory in Kharkiv. On Monday we had a big victory in Kharkiv. We went to the court sittings to prosecutor Sagadubov, who was lustrated and then was restored at his position. That was the sitting of the Court of Appeal, and he basically has to be dismissed. Then Maxim Zimfirov, the ex-prosecutor of Odessa region, he also submitted his appeal. Chernych, the former head of Department of Protecting Financial Interests of the state. Why do the prosecutors need the status of participants of ATO actions? The information which was in internet in January, that some people received the status of ATO participants, that is classified information, that is statistical information. We do not have all the names. If they want to go fight, let them leave their positions and go and fight in ATO zone. And one more thing, why on the website Prokuratura the department with appointments was closed? We are monitoring the sites of the state authorities. We understand that we do not have the information about who's appointed to the position instead of those who were lustrated. The General Prosecutor Office has no right to hide this information. Why do we need the prosecutors who do not observe the laws of the country? Who hires them? And Yegor Sobolev initiated the collection of signatures for dismissal of Yarem, and the latest information is 142 signatures out of 150 needed are already there. And today, when Vitaly Yarem has to be in the parliament, he will be presented this list of claims to the general prosecutors, and that hopefully will in the result of that, those MPs who hasn't signed will sign it.
I'm grateful to my colleagues who have dwelt in detail about the events that happened this week, but I would like to specifically tell you about Monday. On Monday, in the Kharkiv Court of Appeal, Mr. Sukhodubov was deprived of his position. He is dismissed and he works no more in the prosecutor's office. Why this is significant? Because by her decision, the Judge Samoilova, having restored Mr. Sukhodubov, created a precedent, but we were able to transform this precedent into our victory. I'm very grateful to public activists and to the residents of Kharkiv who came to this court and who actually made the court and Mr. Sukhodubov to implement, to fulfill the law. And now, through the internet, I have letters from many people who started to monitor all the appeals that those dismissed officials file with the courts. And this is from Sumy and from other cities. This testifies to the fact that the public is joining the process, but we would like the authorities to join in the process, because whatever changes we introduce, whatever new laws we adopt, if the authorities do not want to perform the law, then to fulfill the law, they won't do. Some people they want to dismiss, but some they want to retain. And we address the authorities. We address Mr. Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine. In every country where the process of lustration was successful, it was the presidents who headed the process. In Poland, in Lithuania or Georgia, I address you, Mr. Poroshenko. Instead of quoting the words of Mr. Bukiki that the law needs improvement, head the process of lustration. Otherwise, we will lose a lot of time. Yes, the public will complete the process, but this will last for long. This will take 3, 4, or 5 years, and we don't have so much time. Mr. Poroshenko, perform your duty and dismiss the officials who automatically fall within the first turn of lustration. Now, when we meet public activists, we hear that the old schemes are coming back, and the Institute of Controllers comes back. And this is a shame for Ukraine, the shame for everyone who stood on the Maidan. So my appeal to the officials is don't ignore the law, fulfill it. Just a couple of questions.
No questions. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Alexandra and Maxim. I believe